What's up? So, yesterday something huge happened. RED reduced the price of their cameras to $3,000. That is quite insane. I bought this one for $10,000. It has a global shutter, Redcode RAW, and for the price of $3,000, it's an insane little box camera, and I'm out of time. What an intro, right? Well, I'm done ripping off Andreas' hem now. But unlike Andreas, I'm not really here to do any insane VFX. Instead, today we're gonna talk about the RED Komodo, and it almost feels like the new RED Komodo because it's so cheap. Only $3,000 and you get Redcode RAW, you get a global shutter, you get 17 steps of dynamic range. It might be the best deal ever when it comes to a RED camera. And speaking of, the star of the show is... oh, hang on. Ooh, I still feel like something is missing. I think we're really missing the really cheap and atrocious prop light. Hang on. There we go. Perfect. Before we talk about this camera, let me tell you a bit about my background. I started off flying FPV professionally. I've actually been flying for almost 10 years. And around 5 years ago, I started flying FPV and taking it seriously. So I decided to invest a little bit or a lot into myself, and I spent around $10,000 on this Komodo. With this Komodo, I was able to fly it on an FPV drone and deliver awesome footage. The RED RAW codec, the name, the brand RED, just the fact that I could fly it FPV, the global shutter enabling minimal yellow effects and making the image a lot sharper than you usually get with a rolling shutter camera. Especially in the olden days when the cinelifter tunes, so the big drones, they weren't quite as nice as we have them today. So we did have quite a lot of jitters and stuff in the footage, and the RED Komodo really helped with that. A side note though is that nowadays you usually don't need it because the cinelifters fly so good. So that's my FPV backstory. But I'm also a DP/a director. And why is that? Well, it is quite simple really. I didn't really like what the DPs and the directors did with my material. It didn't really look as good as I would have imagined they could have done, and FPV was such a brand new thing that people didn't really know how to use it in their workflow. It was almost out of spite that I switched over to DPing and later directing, just so I could get control over the FPV images. And it evolved from there, and I've done music videos, I've done commercials, branded work, whatever. And the Komodo up until last year was my A camera actually. I did switch over to the RED Komodo X last year because I needed the higher frame rates, but before that, this was my workhorse. I'm gonna have a simple guess here and assume that you're watching this video because you're curious about the Komodo. And you've probably come across the Komodo X as well. Now, why should you pick the Komodo over the Komodo X? Well, first of all, the price. The Komodo as it stands today is $3,000. The Komodo X goes for around $7,000. So it's over double the price for not quite double the quality and not quite double the features. However, I must say the Komodo X does improve in many areas. For example, you get double the frame rates, which is a really big one. Instead of doing 6K 40 FPS, you can do 6K 80 FPS or 4K 60 goes to 4K 120. For me, that's a big thing because I love shooting in slow motion, and that's the big part why I upgraded. However, there are more stuff as well. The Komodo X has a native V-mount, you don't have to use an adapter plate, and the storage media is a lot better because you're using CF Express Type B, which is a lot cheaper, and it's a lot more compatible, and it's faster to offload even. The Komodo X additionally has slightly better shadows, about 1 stop. The highlights are a little bit better, I would estimate maybe half a stop. The colors might be slightly improved. Personally, I don't really see a difference. Some people say they do, but I have no problems matching this camera as my B camera and using the Komodo X as my A camera. There really is no telling the difference unless you're shooting a dark scene. Now, if I was buying a camera today, I would honestly probably pick up the Komodo. Because the Komodo X does offer a lot more features, but paying well over double for that, I'm not sure I would do that again actually. At that price, it really is a steal. It's the same global shutter, it's the same Redcode RAW codec, and it's the same-ish form factor, which makes this camera so great. Honestly, I would say just pick up the Komodo and use the extra cash you have, or maybe not have, on some better lenses and some better lighting gear. That's what makes the difference, not the camera. I'm sorry to tell you. To understand why this camera matters so much, or rather why it matters that it's so cheap, we need to rewind a bit. RED was founded in the mid-2000s, and in 2007 they released the RED 1, a 4K RAW cinema camera for $17,000. That might sound expensive now, but at the time, film cameras cost well over $100,000, And digital cinema just wasn't there yet. The RED one flipped the industry on its head. Suddenly indie filmmakers had access to true cinematic tools, and Hollywood took notice. Soon RED cameras were being used on massive productions like The Social Network, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and even The Hobbit. A big part, and the most controversial part by far, is what made RED cameras legendary. It's the Redcode RAW, and the special thing about the Redcode RAW is that it's compressed inside the camera body. RED is the sole proprietor for this patent, which makes them very unique in the market. So you get the flexibility of RAW video, you have adjustable ISO, white balance and exposure in post, without the storage nightmare of something like ProRes RAW or uncompressed formats. That means you get more dynamic range, you get more control and a smoother grading experience. What is wrong with this camera, and why would you maybe not want this camera? First of all, the autofocus is nothing you would ever want to touch. It works if you're doing fast-paced action, which I know it's contradictory, but usually when you're doing fast-paced action, if you miss one shot, you probably have 10 others, so it's not as vital. But if you're shooting interviews, if you're shooting anything that is vital, that you hit every single second, I'm not going to use this autofocus, unfortunately. With that said, with the new RF glass from Canon, it is a lot better, and they have released many updates since the camera was released 5 years ago. So it isn't as bad as you would think. But honestly, if you're buying this for the autofocus, please don't. If all you're doing is interviews, maybe you should stick with Canon or Sony, and the RED is not really the right one for you. Now, secondly, the battery situation is quite atrocious. This camera uses BP9 Canon batteries, which are, first of all, they're quite expensive, and also they are quite hard to get nowadays because they are more or less extinct. The easiest ones to get is the RED branded ones, which cost a lot of money. So what I usually do instead is I use a tilt-up plate to get a V-mount adapter on here. There's other brands as well, but yeah, usually adapting this to a V-mount battery is the best thing you can do. And the last thing is, as you can see, this camera is very small. Like, it's quite unnoticeable. No one is really caring about this camera, which means you have to rig it out. You need a monitor, you need a top handle, you need probably some bottom support to support some rods. And when you build it out, it becomes quite a big camera. But this also has its benefits, because this camera was initially planned as a crash camera. So that means you can mount it inside a car, you can mount it outside a car, you can mount it on a bike, you can mount it on a helmet, because it's so easy, it's so small. You can walk, it's no worries. It's so small, it's so easy to use, so you don't have to care at all about it really. Mounting this is just as easy as mounting a mirrorless camera, except you get the global shutter and the Redcode RAW, which is quite the benefit, I must say. So more often than not, this camera has been running for over 300 hours. At least half of it, we've been using it as a crash camera. And with that, I mean, we've used it to mount outside a car, inside a car, on an FPV drone. And when I do that, I usually just have it like this, very naked. One final thing I would like to say is the storage media. We use CFast 2.0 in this one, and this memory card alone is €500. So holding it like this out in the street is kind of unnerving, actually. It's quite on the expensive side, but you can probably pick one up on the used market, because the Arri Alexa uses the same cards. The Arri Alexa Mini, that is. So this is a real-world example for me, and this happened just the other day. So I was away at the livestream event, working as the lead cameraman, and we had some problems with our FX6s. Basically, the production house forgot to include the monitors, which we're all humans, that happens. I wasn't mad about it. But I was not able to change the SDI output. This meant we had no SDI output because they were stuck in 4K and we needed 1080p for the livestream. Being the people pleaser that I am, I rushed home and I got my two RED cameras and I set them up for the livestream. This is where it gets interesting. The Sony FX6 is supposed to have a similar dynamic range to the RED Komodo and the RED Komodo X. But as we saw on the livestream, we could expose to the outside where we saw the beautiful Vienna city line, and we could have a proper exposure on the inside where the people were talking. Normally with the Sony FX6 we get to pick one of them, but thanks to the dynamic range of the RED Komodos, we could actually get both, and the livestream guys were so happy. So I think for the next one we're skipping the FX6s and we're probably gonna hop over to the RED Komodos. So I've been saying a lot of great things about the RED Komodo, but we have to be honest here, it's a 5-year-old camera. Does it still hold up in 2025? In my opinion, it still does. The image quality you get out of the RED Komodo is elite. There is nothing else on the market for this price that can even match it in any way, depending on what you're shooting. So inside we have a Super 35 sensor, which, to be fair, is not as trendy right now. Full frame really is on the agenda, but I would like to remind you the Alexa 35, which is widely regarded as probably the best camera in the world right now, which costs around $100,000 depending on options, etc. There is a cheaper one for $50,000, but let's not get into that in this video. Anyway, that camera uses a Super 35-ish sensor. So if that camera doesn't have a full frame and it's the best camera in the world, I don't see why you should not pick this one because it's not a full frame sensor. And I do agree it does suck if you have a full frame lens, but for example if you have an EF or if you have a PL lens, you can just adapt it via speed booster and get that full frame look and an additional stop of light even if you have a Super 35 sensor. So it's not a huge deal. As I mentioned several times already, the real sales pitch for this camera is the global shutter. Now, why should you care about global shutter? For your documentary work, maybe it doesn't apply to you, but honestly the trends we see today, especially on social media, enables fast cuts, a lot of whip pans and a lot of transitions that are natural but just fast whips. With a global shutter you get no artifacts, you get no bendy poles, it's just perfect. Another thing that makes this camera pretty great, which admittedly other options also have, is the RF mount. Now the RF mount gives you the option to mount a Canon EF lens, you can also mount normal REPL, and basically every other mount that is made before 2015 I would say you can rig on this one. And the clear outliers is that Sony E doesn't work and the new Nikon C mount doesn't work. Otherwise, basically all other lenses is gonna work on this camera, which is pretty nice. That kind of flexibility really is a dream if you're swapping between your cinematic lenses, your documentary lenses, your vintage lenses, whatever you need, you can probably get on this one. Which is really nice if you live in a smaller market where maybe you don't have all of the lenses available to you in a rental. Maybe you only have the EF lenses, maybe you only have PL lenses. Whatever it is, you can probably use it on this camera. So who should actually buy a RED Komodo in 2025? Well, if you do music videos, if you do commercial work, if you do branded content, if you do social media, this is going to be a great tool to have. However, if you only do documentary style work, if you only do interviews, it's probably not the right camera for you. It's gonna be fine, absolutely, but the no autofocus thing is quite a big deal, especially if you're doing documentary work, where you usually do not get a second chance to do a shot, and if the focus is missed, the focus is missed. The shot is ruined, or you have to take the shot with the missed focus. For example, I'm using the Komodo X right now, which has a similar autofocus performance compared to this one. This is just a YouTube video, so if the shot is out of focus at any time, you probably don't care, or I'll put some B-roll over it. No one is gonna cry about this, and the autofocus honestly works good enough for me. However, when I'm doing corporate interviews, which I end up doing quite a lot, I usually stick to manual focus. So, at sub $3,000, $2,999, it is quite the steal right now. You're getting a global shutter, Redcode RAW, RF mount flexibility, and that signature red look in a really compact body. I do recognize though, you do need to rig it out. You do need a monitor, cage, a V-mount adapter, etc. So it's not for everyone. It is not really fair to call it a $3,000 camera. Like if you buy a Sony FX3, all you need is a lens and some storage media and you're good to go. With that said, if I were starting fresh today, I would definitely pick up a Komodo. So that's it for now, and please do let me know, would you pick up a Komodo now? Or are you going with an FX3, maybe Canon R5C, Canon R5 Mark II, or something in that price range? I would love to see if RED gets more adoption, especially now that Nikon owns them and all of the other cameras are swapping over to Z mount. Is it gonna be a better camera? Are they gonna release a new version? Probably, since this is so price dropped, but still $3,000, even if it's a 5-year-old camera, it is so worth it. If you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button, leave a comment, positive or negative. All of the engagement really helps. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff, and I'll see you in the future.